Hi, Robert here from Absolute Body Systems. This video today is on male belly fat, specifically why guys get belly fat and more in that particular area more than anywhere else in their body, and how to shift it. Now, there's a big misconception with belly fat that it's linked towards your calorific value, so calories in, calories out. And although that's partially true, it's also mainly linked, or primarily mainly linked, to stress levels. Now, let's not confuse what we mean by stress here, because when we think stress, a lot of us automatically think psychological stress, like stress of your work, stress of having a family to look after and paying bills and everything else. This stress can be in the form of food as well as those things that I've just mentioned. So it can be physical, environmental, or emotional stress. The body just recognizes stress in general, whether it's physical, environmental, or emotional. So what happens, let's just run through it first, what happens, and then we'll come back to it and then speak more about what actually needs to be done to prevent it. So what happens is the body gets stressed either emotionally from the things that are happening in your life, environmentally and chemically through the things that you're putting on your skin, in your hair, you're breathing in, or physically from either eating the wrong types of food or could be also even over exercising. The body gets stressed, and what happens is it releases a stress hormone, many stress hormones actually, but one main one called cortisol. Now, cortisol is a good thing. You need it to function properly in everyday life. But there's a difference between cortisol levels rising and then falling and chronic cortisol or cortisol levels being elevated for a high degree of time, high level of time. If cortisol levels are raised for a long period of time, then that turns into chronic stress in the body, and then that then creates a problem. So from this cortisol, what happens then is when your cortisol level rise, you get increased cravings for salty and sugary types of foods. It can be one or the other, but generally it's those two things. So think your junk processed foods, alcohol and everything else. You start to get cravings for these types of things. Now a craving, unfortunately, again, it's a hormonal balance or imbalance, so it's not something you can just man up and switch on and off. There's a chemical imbalance within the body that makes you crave these things. Um, and it's something within the brain that'll decide whether you actually have them or not. From this craving, the foods, your insulin levels are then increased because you have the foods, which are primarily, or should I say predominantly, carbohydrate based. This then allows the pancreas to release insulin. The insulin is then released and you then store body fat. And for guys, we store it more in the stomach. And cortisol is the hormone here. Cortisol is the hormone that is linked to, more than any other hormone, to belly fat. Whereas I've done a video on thigh, hip and bum fat for ladies, and um, the hormones that are more primarily linked to those areas are insulin and estrogen and progesterone as well, or lack of it. But speaking about belly fat, what you need to do, so this is basically the cycle and this is what happens. So what you need to do is you need to first of all go right back to the start here, and we need to talk about stress. So how do you overcome the stress? So it's one of those questions, isn't it? How do you actually overcome stress? So let's speak about it. So first of all, let's speak about the food, the physical side of stress. So the physical side can be over exercising, and this is a common thing that happens with people who want to lose weight. They tend to think that more is better. And I see this all the time, and I actually have to tell a lot of my clients to actually tone it down a little bit because they're training too hard. Or not training too hard in any given session, but training too frequently. They're training too often. And this is something that can actually lead to more body fat. So what you actually want to do is you want to be training clever. You want to be combining your weight training with your cardio training, and you want to be strategically aligning it with the foods that you're eating. And the foods that you're eating again need to be foods that are not inflammatory causing. So these are foods that are low in the glycemic index, so clean foods. So let's speak about carbs. You have sweet potato, quinoa, oats, assuming that you're not gluten intolerant. Um, and The other side of or brown rice, and the other side of the carbs are then things like white rice and pastas and potato and bread and other types of grain. These are the things that higher GI that are inflammatory causing and can stress the intestinal tract a little bit. Then the other, or the second dimension of this, the stress, so we've done the physical, the second dimension is the emotional, and this is obviously things like having to pay your mortgage every month. Have you just had an argument with your wife? Do you know, have you got bills to pay? Have you got a deadline to meet at work? These things are emotional, they're brought about by the mind, and this is the emotional stress that we need to back off from. And many people do different things. Some people watch a funny film. Some people look to religion. Some people meditate. Some people go a walk. I personally go a drive in the car, and it just allows me to just unwind. Everybody does it different, but you've got to have a release for that stress. It's like a pressure release valve. Like eventually, if you haven't got a pressure release valve, then the pressure will just build up, and eventually something will just go bang. So, and for us, something going bang can be as little as body fat, but as high and as dangerous as high blood pressure, strokes, heart attacks, a bunch amongst other things, cancers. The third dimension of the stress is the environmental, the chemical. And this is the things that you put in your body, the things that you put on your body, and the things that you breathe in. I'm not going to get too much into this because it freaks a lot of people out, because you wouldn't believe half the things that are on and in things. But that's a third dimension. It's another dimension. So those three separate areas are what stress the body, and what can be related to whether cortisol rises or falls, or whether it becomes chronic stress or just a low level stress. This then in turn moves on to whether you get cravings or not. So these cravings are decided by whether you get stressed or not. And the foods that you then eat from these cravings then will dictate whether you get body fat. In terms of the exercise side of stuff and the food that you should be eating, here's what I would recommend in simple, basic terms. Exercise, and I say this all the time. I say it all the time because people just let it go right over their head. You've got to combine HIIT training with HIIT training, high intensity interval training with high intensity resistance training. That's high intensity interval training for cardio, high heart rate, low to burn carbs and fat, and high intensity resistance training to put some pressure onto your tendons, ligaments, and muscles to increase your lean muscle tissue, which in turn will burn more body fat. If you think about body fat, or think about muscle rather, like an engine in a car, the bigger the engine, the more fuel it's going to burn. And it's the same with the human body. It's the same with muscle and body fat. Body fat's a dormant tissue. Muscle is an active tissue. Muscle burns. It regulates your metabolism. Body fat's just there to be used as energy. So it's not, although it's something that we need for survival, excess amounts of it it's not something that we need. In terms of the food that you're eating, you want to carb cycle. So you want to predominantly eat your carbs more after training and on training days, and not so much, if any, on non-training days. Definitely strategically put a cheat day in there once per week, or a cheat meal once per week. Something else I would also recommend in terms of the carbs being more specific, I would say that you want to be having anywhere between 5 to 15, and this is something that a lot of professionals recommend, between 5 to 15 bites of clean carbs. And the difference between the 5 to 15 is dependent on your activity levels, your body size, your metabolic type, and a bunch amongst other things. It's basically an experiment for you to work on. So if you're gaining body fat, decrease the bites. If you're losing muscle tissue, then increase the bites. So balance your food with your exercise. Ensure that you don't get stressed. Find a medium to de-stress. And it's probably not the magic formula that you were looking for, but that is simply how to burn body fat and how to not gain body fat on the belly for guys. It works slightly different for women, but that's how to control it as much as possible. In a nutshell, exercise more by adding weight training in along with your cardio, eat clean, and de-stress. If you want to know about any of our transformations, you can check out our website at absolutebodysystems.co.uk. You can also find us on Facebook. You can check out where we put tons of information up there every day. There's some opt-ins where you can get some free recipe books, and there's a shredded manifesto in there as well. You can also check out our transformation pictures on there as well. Failing that, if you want to get in touch, you can contact me personally at robertmcvie@gmail.com. And yeah, let me know what you think of the video, guys. If it's helped you in any way, feel free to share the video and pass it on to anybody that you think that it might help. This is Robert from Absolute Body Systems. Speak to you soon. Hey, it's Robert here from Absolute Body Systems. This video today, as you can see from the title, is how to burn thigh, hip, bum fat for females. So a big long title. So the thigh, hip and bum all around the same sort of area. So let's dive into, first of all, why women tend to deposit body fat on their lower half, statistically more than what they do in their upper half, and why guys tend to deposit it on their upper part of their body. Let's start with that. Why they deposit it on the upper part of their body, but women on the lower half. So let's first of all dive into what a cell actually is. So use this little blue circle here as a cell. You've got millions of cells, billions of cells within your body, and there's different receptors for each cell. And you notice these little things, these little squiggly arrows coming off. These are like these are the receptors for each cell. They're kind of like a little telegraph pole, if you like, and there's lots of them all the way around each cell. And excuse me, I've got a bit of a cold, so keep coughing all the time. What happens is they receive signals from other parts of the body and from hormones. And you have two different types of receptors within a cell. You have beta receptors and you have alpha receptors. So that'll become more apparent later on what the different types of cells are. If we look a little bit further down, alpha receptors respond to major fat burning hormones, and these are known as catecholamines. And the catecholamines can be known to us as, if you're British, epinephrine and norepinephrine, or if you're American, Canadian, or across that side of the water, it's adrenaline and noradrenaline. Dopamine's also another one, but not something we're going to talk about today. Basically what happens is when these catecholamines combine with the beta receptors, this is the two that we spoke about above, the beta receptors and alpha receptors, when they combine with the beta receptors you get increased fat burning. Now there's a problem with this, though. The problem is this. Women have more alpha receptors in their lower half than they do beta receptors. When these catecholamines, your epinephrine and norepinephrine, dopamine and everything else, when they combine and they merge to alpha receptors, then they don't burn much body fat. But when they combine to the beta receptors, lots of body fat gets burnt. So the problem being, like it says here, that women have more alpha receptors in their lower half than they do beta receptors. So what do? It all then comes down to different things from what's happening to you through the environment you're around about, to what you're eating and drinking, and also your stress levels. We'll actually touch more on stress levels for belly fat in another video, but just for the purposes of this one, for thigh, hip and bum fat, different things you want to do. You want to cut out processed, high processed, fatty and sugary foods, fizzy drinks, anything along those lines. You want to drink 2 to 3 litres of bottled water per day. That's very important. That's flushing out all the toxins from your body. You want to avoid heating anything in plastic in a microwave, as this leads to excess estrogens leaking into your food. So there's estrogens within the plastic, and they basically then mimic natural estrogen within your body. And then from the links from your hypothalamus to your pituitary, and then a bottleneck all the way down, it transfers through your thyroid and into your cells and everything else, and the body starts to get confused and the hormones don't work the way that they should work. So you start to deposit more body fat or maintain more body fat. Another thing you want to do is you want to combine HIIT training with HIIT training. And basically what the difference is HIIT is obviously high intensity interval training. This is cardio style exercise where you're getting your heart rate high for a set period of time, and then you're getting your heart rate low. And what this does is it helps you to burn body fat quicker, because when your heart rate's high, you're burning carbohydrates, which is your primary energy source. When your heart rate's low, as soon as your carb stores, your primary energy sources have been depleted, you start to burn fat stores. Now the problem with it is you can't just go for one or the other, because both of them together equal 1 calorie. So if you put carbs and fat through a through a blender, you're going to equal 1 calorie. So you need to combine them together. You need to shock the body into getting the heart rate high to getting the heart rate low. Stress it for a little bit and then give it a lot of rest. So the rest is actually beneficial. The HIIT training, this is high intensity resistance training, and it's basically the same approach where you're getting your heart rate high and you're getting your heart rate low. The only difference is that you're actually using an external resistance. Now this external resistance can be your body weight, it can be kettlebells, it can be suspension trainers, it can be barbells, dumbbells, anything that you need to externally move, and you're having to apply a resistance against it. This is going to tear down the muscle fibers and create tiny microscopic tears within the muscle fibers, and then through the food that you eat, and your food groups, for protein as an example, the protein will repair the muscle tissue through protein synthesis, and then the muscle becomes stronger, it adapts, and then you start to progress and your body starts to lose weight or gain muscle. Point number 5, time your carbs after your weights session, after your weights workouts, and no carbs and non-training days to keep your insulin levels down. So basically what I want you to think here is every single time you eat a carb, now let's be clear on what a carb is. Carbs are complex carbohydrates, which are rice, potatoes, pasta, quinoa, oats, all those starchy based foods. They're also sugar based foods, anything with sugar in it. This includes fruit, which has fructose in it. Whatever form the sugar comes in, or the carb comes in, what you need to realize is your body recognizes that just simply as sugar, from glucose to glycogen. It doesn't recognize it as any specific type of sugar. It just recognizes it as sugar, as a primary energy source, and it will utilize it for energy if you're active, and if your stores have been depleted, or for body fat, or for energy to use at a later date if you're going to be active, or for body fat if you're not, or if you don't get active. So you need to time your carbs when your energy stores have been depleted, and the best way to do that is to have them immediately after your weights workouts, and some high intensity interval training workouts as well. If your goal is to put muscle on, then the principles for this would be different. If you're looking to put on quite a bit of lean muscle tissue, a bit of muscle bulk, your principles for this would be slightly different. We'll cover that in another video. But for the purposes of this video, if it's just purely fat loss and specifically weight loss, then you, or for weight loss, and should I say specifically fat loss, you want to be consuming your carbs after your weights workouts. On non-training days, I would stay away from carbs. Again, that depends how many days a week you're training, so I'm not suggesting you go more than 3 days, alternating between carbs and no carbs without carbs. So if you think like a day on, a day off, a day on, a day off, something like that. Because you really don't need as much carbs if you're not as active. You don't need to be using them as much. When you have carbs, your pancreas releases insulin to balance your blood sugar levels. So when your body releases insulin, it starts to, if your blood sugar levels basically go too high, and obviously the more carbs you take on, the more insulin you produce, and the more insulin you produce, the more storage of body fat you've got. Insulin's an anabolic hormone, which means, I can't speak today, is an anabolic hormone, which means that you can use it to gain muscle, but if it's not used in the right way, you can also deposit it as body fat. That's pretty much all I've got. It's very simple, but what I wanted you to understand was really this part at the top, the reason why women gain more on their thighs, their hips and their bum. So this is a typical example of where you'll get women who do loads of exercise or dieting, and they'll lose a lot of weight, particularly from their upper body, but they don't lose it from their lower body. And the lower body tends to be more directed towards excess estrogens and insulin levels, whereas the belly tends to be more directed towards cortisol levels. And that's something we're going to talk about in another video in a couple of days. I hope this has helped you. If you're interested in learning more about this and learning more about our transformation programs, then you can head on over to absolutebodysystems.co.uk. That's absolutebodysystems.co.uk, and you can check out our transformation pictures. You can also check us out on Facebook. You can hit us a message, or you can email me privately at robertmcvie@gmail.com. This is Robert from Absolute Body Systems. Until next time, cheerio.